So in case you're keeping track, Apple today has officially released iOS 18.4 release candidate number 2. Yes, earlier this week, Apple released iOS 18.4 release candidate number 1, and today on a Friday, release candidate number 2. Now, this could mean several things. Apple could plan to release this software sooner than expected. We'll talk about the release date here in just a couple of minutes. If you're updating from the RC1 to the RC2, you're looking at about 7.5, a little over 7.5 gigs of a download, overwriting the entire OS. Now let's jump into settings here. General, let's go under the About and iOS version. Take a look at the latest build number for iOS 18.4, release candidate number 2. Now I want to talk about two things that I've experienced that are issues within the latest RC1 and hopefully Apple will address with RC2. And I also want to talk about some major performance improvements as well. Now, aside from iOS 18.4 RC2 for the iPhone, Apple also released iPadOS release candidate number 2 for the iPad and macOS 15.4 release candidate number 2 for macOS. Now, macOS RC2 was released yesterday, so you can update your Mac, your iPad, and your iPhones today if you're running RC1 to RC number 2, release candidate number 2. So I want to talk about the two bugs that I've experienced on the first RC. Number 1, there was an issue where my iPhone rebooted twice randomly out of nowhere, just completely rebooted. I was just browsing on my phone, it just shut down and rebooted on its own. And the other time I set it down on my desk and all of a sudden I heard the reboot chime and my iPhone was just randomly rebooting. So it happened twice within the last 3 to 4 days from RC1 now to RC2, and hopefully this second RC will address this issue. Now, one thing that I know this RC has fixed is a bug within screen time. Now, I typically don't talk about screen time bugs because the more you talk about them, if there's a child watching, they'll know about the actual limitations and actual bypasses. So screen time, within iOS 18.4, Apple has addressed an issue where if you have screen time set on a child's device for app limits, they can actually delete the application and reinstall the app in order to bypass those app limitations. And Apple has now finally officially addressed this with iOS 18.4 RC2. I've tested this because it was still present on RC1, and RC2 definitely addresses this issues for those parents out there. Now, I want to talk about performance, as I mentioned, because I did run a benchmark here. Now, earlier this week, RC1 right there below the first one, and then the one on the top is RC2. Take a look at those numbers. So you see there the single core and the multi-core performance on today's releases is actually quite improved, as you can see right there. So the single core score on the top here, we see improvements, and the multi-core score is an even bigger jump in terms of performance. So take a look at those numbers. Again, RC1 and RC2 with a lot better numbers in terms of performance. And there you guys have it. Hopefully this will address the performance issues for some users that are experiencing camera lag issues and photo app issues. But keep in mind that this software, as I mentioned, could now release a little sooner than expected. So I was expecting iOS 18.4, the official release for everyone to download on April 7th. Now I still think that could be the case, but now that we have an RC2 on a Friday, this could mean that Apple could release as early as Tuesday, April 1st, or even April 2nd of next week. Keep in mind that Apple did mention that this software was going to release in April, so I don't think the 31st of March will be the actual release date. I could be wrong, but I don't think on Monday next week we'll see it on the 31st. If anything, we'll see it on the 7th, but again, I could be wrong. Anything could happen at this point. So just keep in mind that the software update will be available here in just a couple of days. Again, no one really knows exactly when the software will be available to the general public, but there you guys have it. Just a couple of days away, iOS 18.4 RC2, some last minute changes. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend, everyone, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.